Before you listen to this BBC podcast, I'd like to tell you about something else you might enjoy. My name's Alison Hindle, and I commission audio drama and fiction for the BBC. It's a great privilege, because I get to unearth stories people love. You should see the books and scripts covering my floor, from new talent and established writers as well as classics. The BBC has such a rich history of making great audio drama. We're still the largest producer in the world, and the popularity of podcasts means we can share what we do with even more people. So if you like to lose yourself in a gripping audio drama or book, find your next listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Phil Goodlad, and this is the Scottish Football Daily Podcast, keeping you up to speed with everything you need to know about our beautiful game. It's Tuesday, the 20th of August. Good gracious, where is the time flying? Here's what's on the agenda today.
Dessers is in. Dessers, can he find the shot here? Dessers, a goal! Kick. Well, the referee's chopped it off.
The row rumbles on after Cyril Dessers' controversial League Cup goal against St Johnstone at the weekend. We'll discuss after the Perth club met with the SFA to seek an explanation. Also, with the countdown to the closing of the transfer window well underway, could this man be on the move?
Not O'Reilly into the box, he's going to shoot with the right boot. Oh, it's sensational! It's utterly sensational from Matt O'Reilly. He smashes it in with a weaker foot into the top corner.
What would it mean for Celtic if he departs? And he's not the only midfielder in demand.
Tierney plays it across. It's half away. McTominay! It's the stuff of dreams for Scotland, and it's the stuff of dreams for Manchester United. Scott McTominay.
You get the latest on the future of Scotland star Scott McTominay. Lots to discuss this morning. I'm delighted to say two of the finest to discuss these things joins us. Mark Atkinson, the Scotsman's sports editor, and Mark Critchley from The Athletics. Gentlemen, already I know the problems we're going to have in this podcast. It's which Mark to speak. Do we label you Mark 1 and Mark 2? The two Marks? How do we do this?
I've always been known as Critch by my friends, and I consider you both friends already, even after this short time. So you can go with that if you like.
And I'm also known as Atco, so you can go with Atco and Critch. It gives it.
Right. Well, I'm not going to tell you what my friends call me because we'll get shut down if that's the case. But Critch and Atco. Right. I might just, for the first few minutes, speak about Mark Atkinson and Mark Critchley, just not to confuse me and the audience. Listen, there's lots to discuss, as ever, with Atco and Critch. Before that, though, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. The former Rangers boss, Michael Beale, has claimed he wasn't fully aware of the club's financial position when he took over at Ibrox. Aberdeen are looking at a potential loan deal for Millwall Scotland striker Kevin Nisbet. They are, of course, looking for a replacement for Bojan Majowski. Inverness Cally Thistle's former chairman Alan Savage says the club have been handed a major boost as £3 million of historic debt has been wiped out. And Bologna's Daniel Ndoye has posted a photo on social media of teammate Lewis Ferguson doing some light training as the Scotland midfielder begins his recovery from knee injury. Mark Atkinson, I fear there is only one place to start, and that is the continual rumbling and fallout from the Cyril Dessers goal. I almost feel like I need to explain what happened, just in case people have been living under a rock for the last 2 days and don't know what happened. But of course, it was a controversial opener for Rangers at Hampden. Dessers scoring, referee Matthew McDermott signalling for a foul by the striker, but then reversed the decision following a VAR intervention. St Johnstone thought that play had been halted, but the SFA later released guidance saying the whistle had been blown after the ball hit the net. I'm going to ask you for your opinion in a moment. Firstly, though, do you agree with me that it is just almost tragic that we are speaking about this decision so early in the season, 3 days after it happened? We're focusing on a VAR decision. Did it work? Did it not work?
Tragic, but almost inevitable, because VAR has dominated Scottish football since it came in. And while we've had a change at the top of refereeing, with Willie Collum coming in, and change to the VAR guidance, it was a matter of time before something came along to steal the narrative, and it's this incident, and it's a very controversial incident. It's quite a complicated incident as well because there's a lot of moving parts to it, and of course it was the opening goal in a cup tie, which makes it even more important. It's disappointing, but yes, sense of inevitability that by August we would have a decision like this to chew over.
I, like you, have absolutely no skin in the game on this one, neither with Rangers, with St Johnstone, with the Scottish FA. From a football fan's point of view, and I was listening to it on the radio on Saturday, and of course confusion completely descended because we thought the goal was chopped off and then Rangers had scored in that. At a half-filled Hampden, I would have thought a whistle would have been easy to have been heard, and it would have been easy to have been picked up by the radio microphones, by the TV microphones. The fact that we've not heard a whistle and not heard any audio of that whistle, are you surprised that that's the case?
Yeah, I suppose I probably am. You hear a whistle in a full stadium more often than not, so a half stadium, and Hampden's not particularly raucous right now when Rangers are playing. So yeah, I suppose there is a bit of surprise there. The biggest issue for me from watching it in real time was I wasn't convinced it was a foul in the first place. I think that decision can be argued. I then also wonder why the St Johnstone players stopped. They must have seen or heard something. That's what football players do. You're taught to play to the whistle.
And Mark, that was my point about the surprise, because Craig Levein came out afterwards and said my players thought that they'd heard a whistle. So if there had been a whistle, we in the media would have probably heard it by now. Somebody would have released it on social media. But the fact that the players thought they had a whistle, we have this grey area.
Yeah, there's also the referee's body language as well. Matthew McDermott does appear to intimate that there's been an infringement before the ball hits the net. Now, whether that's through a whistle or whether it's his arm gestures, players do respond to what the officials do. And that adds to the confusion. You're not just talking about a whistle here, you're talking about the referee's body language. And I think there's a sort of acceptance probably at the very top at the SFA that McDermott probably doesn't help the situation with how he acts in that precise moment. They, of course, are adamant that there was a whistle blown, but it was after the ball had struck the net. So they're quite clear on that the goal should stand and that everything was done correctly in that regard. But it's that kind of grey area where referees do certain things that players react to, and it's a shame that it's a delicately poised cup tie like that, because it was at that point, has been not settled, but certainly influenced heavily by that moment.
I wonder too, Mark, and Mark Critchley, I'll get your view of Scottish football and VAR in just a moment, because that might be interesting in this debate. But from your point of view, Mark Atkinson, the fact that St Johnstone has held these talks with the SFA, but it's all been behind closed doors and we're not really getting anything official from those that took part. Would it be easier for us as fans and us in the media to just get some clarification of this, to be either audio released or the footage released that clearly shows what's happened? Because at the moment, depending on what camp you're in, or if you're like us and you're neutral, it's like we are confused with what's happened.
Well, I think you can have conversations off the record with certain people that can inform the media better. But ultimately, I think with VAR as a whole, there needs to be more transparency for the football fan. The biggest stakeholder in our game are the supporters, and VAR leaves them constantly confused, infuriated, irritated by decisions. And there does need to be a better policy brought in to explain controversial decisions. Whether that is the new head of refereeing, Willie Collum, speaking, I do believe Willie's thinking of doing that more often when they do discuss decisions that are controversial. There does need to be a pretty swift move to making the supporter just better aware of what they're watching, why something happened, and clearing up controversial and grey areas.
And also, if somebody has made a mistake, be it the St Johnstone players that thought they had a whistle, but the whistle came after the ball crossed the line, or whether it's the referee who didn't blow a whistle, or whether it's us who don't know the rules as well as we should do, both as fans and as pundits. Maybe somebody just coming out and saying, yeah, we made a mistake, let's move on.
Yeah, sometimes people just don't like saying that publicly. And I think there's always a degree of protection over referees in this country, at times rightly so, given the spotlight and the scrutiny and the pressure that's put on them. On this occasion, I just think it would clear up what we're talking about right now. It would put it to bed straight away if we just had somebody potentially from the Scottish Football Association who comes out on a Monday and says, this happened for this reason, and we move on.
Mark Critchley, from your vantage point across Hadrian's Wall, are you looking upwards to us thinking, God blimey, VAR in Scotland, I could write a thesis on this?
Not particularly, because it's exactly the same problems that have been happening this side of the border as well, and basically everywhere where VAR has been implemented. I think the issue with VAR is that it implements another layer of rules that you suddenly have to retrofit to the rest of the game, if you like. What is clear and obvious? Now, on this side of the board, we've now got what is referee's call. You have all these other questions that start cropping up as a result of implementing VAR, and a process that was supposed to make things clearer and was to bring more clarity has confused things, and that's been the case down here. I'm sure it's been the case up there since it was introduced back in 2022. And I look at any league now where there isn't VAR, some of the lower leagues in England, for example, and I'm feeling intensely jealous of them now, because it feels like a form of the game that has been lost. But unfortunately, as I think you'll find in Scotland as well, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube with this sort of thing. And now that it's here, it's probably here to stay, and we've got to try and get our heads around it and make the best sense of it that we can.
But Critch, and as you've referred to me as your friend, and Mark Atkinson as well, I can call you Critch. This is your fault, because for years and years and years, as a journalist, you've been banging on like everybody else. We need VAR. We need better rules on what's happened. Be careful what you wish for.
Look, I'd personally like to say it was never my idea. I'm washing my hands of all responsibility of this, okay? But you're absolutely right that there was a lot of pressure from people in the media to bring this in, to bring video technology in. And I think it should be a point just for pause and reflection, really, for all of us, media, fans, people within the game who asked for this to be brought in, for technology. And I don't think it was ever really considered just how fundamentally it would change elements of the game, particularly as we've been discussing here, the relationship with the fans and people in the stadium. I think that has been, almost irreversibly, changed, and there's no way of putting it back. And I think when we look for ways to improve the game, when we have huge campaigns, if you like, as there was for video technology, I think we need to take a step back sometimes and think, well, actually, what kind of effect is this going to have on a game that, let's face it, for all that we complain about it, we all love and talk about every day.
Critch is right as well about us in the media and the fans calling for it, but also managers and players called for it too. They were quite happy to bring this in, because they wanted the best possible decision making for the sake of their careers and trophies, etc. I do wonder now, if you held a poll with them all, would they put it back? I like that phrase, that the toothpaste back in the tube. It's definitely not going back in. It's here to stay forevermore.
Have you ever tried to suck toothpaste back into the tube when the kids have gone berserk in the sink? It is the most difficult job.
No, but it's on my to-do list now. I'm intrigued.
Let's move on, because with just a couple of weeks to go until the transfer window closes, it seems like things are starting to ramp up a bit. Mark Critchley, I want to come straight to you down in England. What's happening with Matt O'Reilly at Celtic? Is Matt O'Reilly, the name Matt O'Reilly, on the tip of every English football fan's tongue when it comes to whether the star midfielder from Scotland is going to grace the English Premier League or not?
I have to be honest, no, I don't think so. I don't know if that's where your question was leading me there. No, not particularly. I think not certainly at the clubs that I cover, but then I think he's been linked with Brighton. Is that right? So yes. Perhaps I was not totally across it. But no, I mean, look, he's a player whose name he's made a name for himself at Celtic, obviously with the success there, and it's cropped up a few times, but it's not leading all the back pages. I'll put it that way.
Mark Atkinson, it's across many of the back pages this morning, including the Daily Record, which says Seagulls target O'Reilly which as a headline you think, God blimey, poor old Matt O'Reilly, what's going to happen to him? With 10 days to go until the transfer window, where is your money on whether Matt O'Reilly is still in Scottish football or not come the 1st of September?
I feel like I've written Matt O'Reilly's name so often this summer and mentioned him so often to people. I think Matt O'Reilly will leave. It feels the right time. Where it'll be, I think if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said Atalanta because they seemed hell-bent on getting him. But they appear to have moved on for now. And Brighton, they've got money. I think they just spent £40 million on Jorginho Rutter just yesterday. So they are keen to strengthen their squad under their new manager, Hurzeler. And I just think there's a big void in that Brighton midfield. They lost Pascal Gross over the summer, really important player. And actually, if you look at their midfield, it's quite light. Even though they beat Everton 3-0 at the weekend, it was James Milner, who's 6 years older than his manager. There's a thought for you. Playing in that midfield. He's been there for a long time. They need some fresh blood. And I think Matt O'Reilly would suit Brighton's style of play really well. Possession-based. He's outgrown Scottish football. Let's be honest. He needs a fresh challenge for the sake of his career. And I think Brighton will come close, if not meet that valuation. And then it's all about personal terms. With 10 days to go, I do think O'Reilly will leave, and I think Celtic are braced for it.
What did you make of Brendan Rodgers saying that he needs 2 players to replace O'Reilly? Now, it might be tongue-in-cheek there, or he might be trying to bump the transfer fee up for O'Reilly if he's to lose him. Is he that much of a focus in the Celtic team that he's irreplaceable with just one player?
He's not irreplaceable. I actually think at the start of this season, Reo Hatate has looked irreplaceable ahead of Matt O'Reilly. But as a unit, the Callum McGregor, Matt O'Reilly, Reo Hatate axis, they work so well. And it takes a certain type of player to come in and firstly have the skill set to replace him, but also the mindset and mentality. Playing for Celtic is not easy. The expectation level is absolutely huge there. Paulo Bernardo's come in on a permanent deal. I imagine in time he'll be earmarked as the one to replace him. I think you can't replace Matt O'Reilly like for like now with that money. You'd have to be a bit more creative, and that's probably why he says he wants 2 players to come in. I think Brendan Rodgers is definitely speaking like a man who is preparing for life without his star midfielder. And he'll be thinking, right, who can I bring in? They've been linked with a number of midfielders from various different clubs, and I would expect them to be busy between now and the end of the winter.
And he's also speaking about what was his quote there the weekend? There's lots to do in the transfer market before the window closes. Do you think that we will see a number of new players come, whether Matt O'Reilly stays or goes?
I think if O'Reilly leaves, you'll see a flurry because they'll have a little bit more money to spend. Not that there's a shortage of cash at Celtic. Brendan Rodgers has been very clear about his goal this season. He wants to make an impact in Europe, and by that he means get out of the newly expanded Champions League main phase. To do that, they're going to need a few more players, a few more quality players at both ends of the pitch. And Kyogo Furuhashi, the main striker, is out with shoulder surgery, potential, given that he's got an issue right now. And they need at least one more forward, and I'd say they need a defender as well. So yeah, I do expect Celtic to be busy. They have got money to spend, and as we'll come to in a second, bigger clubs now are getting their transfer business in order, and it filters down the food chain, which means more players become available.
Finally, another midfielder who's been continually linked with a move this summer is Scotland and Manchester United star Scott McTominay. He still remains at Old Trafford at the moment, but of course there's 10 days to go until the transfer window closes. Mark Critchley, are you surprised that McTominay is still a Manchester United player? And let me add a second question to that. Are you surprised at the focus that we put on Scott McTominay because we view him as such a stalwart in our Scotland team?
I'm not surprised that you put a lot of attention on it, absolutely, because he's a player who's incredibly important for Scotland and you'd want to be playing regular football. Am I surprised that he's still at United? Not actually, no. At this point in the window, there's been chatter all summer, and I think there's still very much a chance that McTominay could leave, absolutely. But he is a player that is thought of very highly at United at the same time. He's a valued member of the squad. That has been the consistent line coming out of Old Trafford all summer while speculation has been around. When Erik ten Hag has spoken about him, he hasn't sounded like a manager who wants to lose Scott McTominay. And he's a player who hit double figures for goals last season. He was the third top scorer, more than Marcus Rashford. So I think that if Scott McTominay is going to leave, it's going to take a bid. It's not going to be a massive bid because he's only got 1 year remaining on his contract. But at the same time, United have an option to extend that by an extra year. So it's effectively a 2-year deal.
Why not just trigger that extra year now and to send the message that, no, he is so important to us that we're actually going to keep him for another year?
Well, it's a good question. But the bottom line is that of all the players that are in United's squad, McTominay is their most sellable asset at the moment. And it might be that they need to sell players because they've got their own ambitions in the market. We know that they want a new number 6. They want a new holding midfielder. There's a lot of talk about Manuel Ugarte from Paris Saint-Germain. We know that they've already spent money on Lenny Yoro, on Joshua Zirkzee, on De Ligt and Mazraoui, who came in last week. It depends on who you speak to at United, but what they'll say about this. But there's a sense that they probably need to sell if they're going to do any more business. And McTominay, as a player who has performed well over the last few years, who has reinvented himself in this new role that we've seen, he is their most sellable asset, as I say, and he's the player that would generate the most money on the market, and therefore he is still somewhat still in the shop window, even though he's still very highly thought of and respected at Old Trafford.
Strongly linked over the summer with Galatasaray, Napoli and Fulham. Also reportedly interested. Do you see if he does move Scott McTominay, will he move to Europe or will he stay in the English Premier League?
Well, I mean, Fulham was the English Premier League side that was most strongly linked with him, and that has changed and changed again. They've been in, they've been out, they've been back in again. Their interest was renewed over the last few days, but it changed again just last night. My colleague at The Athletic, Laurie Whitwell, reported that Fulham are set to sign Sander Berge from Burnley in 20 plus $5 million deal, which effectively ends their interest in McTominay. And so you're looking around other Premier League clubs potentially. Everton, there's been a long-standing interest there, but can they deal with the finances? Newcastle are another club who've been linked in the past, but they look very settled in midfield at the moment. So yes, you are looking at potentially a move abroad, and Napoli looks like the strongest option at the minute. Their sporting director, Giovanni Manna, was in England just recently holding discussions over McTominay. They had their 3-0 defeat over the weekend to Verona in their opening game, and they've got Antonio Conte there now as manager. He's been typically laid back and reasonable about transfers, as we all know he usually is. So there's a lot of pressure there to get business done. I think I would imagine that Scott McTominay would prefer to stay in England, if I'm totally honest. I think, look, he's built a career here. He's quite a name here. He's coming off the back of probably his most impressive individual season. He probably still thinks he could do a job at a top half pushing for Europe Premier League club. But if the options are that he has to perhaps try something new, and let's face it, move somewhere where he could be a more regular first team player and have more of an influence on things, then Napoli is looking like at the moment one of the more likely options. Yes.
With your Scotland hat on, Mark Atkinson, would it benefit the national side if Scott McTominay moved on?
I'm not sure. I think McTominay's played very well for Scotland as a Man United player, and he's very comfortable there. And the fact he doesn't play all the time means that he comes up to the national team fresh, and I think we get the benefit out of that. At 27 years old, he's about to hit the peak of his career. Therefore, if he does go to Serie A, that could certainly improve aspects of his game. We've seen Scotland players such as Lewis Ferguson and Aaron Hickey come on since moving to that league, albeit they're slightly younger. McTominay is such a vital part of the Scotland team that you do want him to be in the best shape possible. I just wonder if McTominay is quite content to be at United. There's a lot of talk about McTominay moving, but whenever I watch him play and hear him speak at United, he seems pretty comfortable in his surroundings. And if you were going to sell a player, sometimes you need him to go too. One thing I'd say about Napoli, not the Napoli team that we think of. They finished 10th in Serie A last year, and I don't think they've got European football to look forward to. There's a kind of an element of Napoli that they're not as good as they once were, and they are rebuilding. I think in some respects I'd like to see McTominay continue to fight it out at Man United, because he seems to fit in really well there. And anyone who was at the Man United Rangers game earlier in the season, they'll tell you that Ten Hag spoke quite well about McTominay. You can definitely tell there's a respect level, and he does like him.
That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Because we're friends, I'm going to say Mark Atkinson, or Atco, thank you, from the Scotsman, the editor, and Mark Critchley from The Athletic, or Critch, as we're now going to call you from now on. And many thanks for joining us and giving us this update on Scott McTominay. Remember, we're here with the Scottish Football Daily Podcast every day, every morning, bright and early, so make sure you don't miss out on all the essential news, views and analysis through the week. Join or follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. For now, though, I'm Phil Goodlad. Enjoy our beautiful game, and we'll speak again soon.
This is the shocking moment English football has been dreading.
My name is Moses Swabu, and I used to be a professional footballer, but then I got in deep with organised crime and became a match fixer operating in the English League.
A match-fixing investigator has highlighted 2 matches he says appear to have suspicious betting patterns.
How honest are you going to be with me?
This is 100%. Join me for Sports Strangest Crimes presents Confessions of a Match Fixer. Listen on BBC Sounds.